Thanks for downloading the Swearing In podcast, where you'll hear the origin stories of those who chose to serve. So ground your gear, take a seat, and listen up. The Swearing In podcast starts right now. Hello to all the servicemen and women out there, and welcome to the Swearing In podcast. I am your host, Marty Smith. Today is a continuation of my interview with former Army Staff Sergeant and Bronze Star recipient Chad Rancourt. Chad tells us all about the Army Sniper School and how he received his Bravo 4 sniper certification. He then discusses his deployment to Afghanistan and how that differed from his time in Ramadi, Iraq. So without further delay, let's get back to work. So you're still in. You're still motivated.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you wanna...
Didn't hate life completely at that point. Still as single as one can be. There was, I watched, too many relationships torn apart by this. And
Oh yeah.
Later now we see the effects of all these things on a lot of people. All these, veteran suicides and divorces and all this crazy shit that goes on. But that stuff never really impacted me. But I got back at that point. Got 2 weeks of leave, drank too much, got back.
And you're 21 on these 2 weeks of leave, right?
Yeah, 21. Yeah, it's great. Drank too much, fought too much. Feeling pretty high and mighty at that point after everything we had gone through. Got back, and at that point, not long after, I had got offered a slot to go to sniper school. So of course I wasn't gonna turn that down.
Well, how did that come up? Did you express interest, or they just say, "Hey, we got 2 guys who can go to sniper school. Who's interested? Raise your hand," kind of thing?
So we had 1 slot for a whole battalion.
Uh-huh.
And I had gained a little bit of a reputation from my Iraq tour.
Yeah.
And they knew that I would be able to pass, they assumed that I would have a good chance of passing, and then I was offered the slot. Yeah, so offered a slot to go to a sniper school, and for whatever reason, I was pulled up to my commander's office, and at that point, it was my CO. He took over, I think, shortly after we got back. Captain Wallace, he was a guy that came over to us from 3rd Ranger Battalion. Amazing CO.
Yeah.
Good, certainly fond memories of him. So he pulled me up there and, said that, offered me a slot to go. So a few weeks later, got on a plane to go to Benning again, and I got to Benning, and then at that point they said they were having major range fires and that we were not going to be able to go to sniper school at Benning. So there was actually another older sniper school that they wasn't used very much, and they also do at that point I think they were doing a designated defense marksman school in Arkansas. It was in North Little Rock, and I don't remember the name of the post now. And I should remember the name of it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so they fly us all down to North Little Rock, and then we're all in the airports. And the interesting thing about sniper school is it's what's called a gentleman's course. You're just on your own. It's not like Ranger school. It's not like basic training or anything like that. You just you either pass or you don't. You're just on your own. It's more senior level people that typically go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So they just gave us a ticket, told us to get on a flight, booked the flights for us and everything. And there we are with all of our equipment. Because before you go, you have a packing list that you have to bring. So you have your tripod. And I didn't know shit about being a sniper or anything about that. Other than hearing stories or seen snipers. I saw the Chris Kyle and all those guys, and so I have this huge packing list and some weird shit, a camera tripod and all this stuff. So obviously I had my rifle that was issued to me, the sniper rifle. We had a bunch in our arms room, which is M24. This case never really been fired, maybe a couple times when somebody grabbed it to go to the range a few times, and flying through the airport, checking that. TSA. No, you're not in uniform at that point when you're flying civilian. Them opening it up and seeing, an M24, in a case, the looks on their faces are pretty interesting.
What's the barrel length on that thing?
24 inches.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So M24, it's actually 24 inches, which is interesting. It's just a Remington 700 on a sage stock, or not a sage stock, free floated stock, bull barrel.
All right.
Or varmint barrel. Interestingly, the M24 is a long action, even though it's 308, whereas the M Marines, they don't call it an M24. There's just a short action. It's basically the same rifle except for.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, the Army had the foresight to think that maybe we want to chamber this for something a little bit better than 308. So they made it long action, so you could make it a 300 Win Mag.
Okay. I was doing a little bit of research before we talked, and I was trying to get educated on what the sniper school was about. One of the things that struck me, did you have to go through that psych test?
Yes. So before, when I was offered the sniper school slot, so I had to do a PT test, which is pretty standard, and I have to go out to the range to qualify. You have to qualify expert within a year.
Of course.
I just come back from Iraq. I didn't have that, which is kind of a ridiculous thing. That, hey, go to the range, and I qualify. And then you have to go through a psychological evaluation, which is a funny story. So I went to Blanchfield Army Hospital. For whatever reason, I remember that. I don't remember the name of the military installation.
Wait, hold on a second. Was it? I was looking it up. Was it Camp Joseph?
No, that doesn't.
Camp Robinson.
Robinson. That's it.
Robinson.
Yep, Camp Robinson.
Oh yeah, National Guard place.
Yeah, so Blanchfield Hospital in Fort Campbell is where I had to go for the psych eval, and I just remember going in there, and there was either a psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't remember at this point which one it was, and then they have a series like you sit down on the computer and you answer some questions first. I think it's a pretty standard thing for probably just not just snipers, but anyone that they think has lost their shit, and then you have to sit down and meet actually with the psychiatrist and psychologist.
Oh, you do?
I just remember talking about craft beer for like an hour. At that point, like he brewed his own beer and like he was more than willing or happy to like talk about it. I don't know how we got on the subject, but I specifically remember that for whatever reason.
Yeah. Those who do that can talk forever on it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't shy away from craft beer. At that point, I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
I was, drinking whatever I could get cheapest.
Man after my own heart. Yeah.
But yeah, so, and then, then get to Benning and they say there was major range fires. We couldn't go. So they shipped us down to Camp Robinson, Little Rock, which North Little Rock was a shithole.
Sure. I can't imagine it wouldn't be.
Yeah. And then, so we start training there. So it was 6.5, 7 weeks. Like I said, it was a gentleman's course. You go every day, you come back, and then you're allowed to go do whatever you want. We had rental cars down there.
Wow.
So we'd go out and eat. No drinking. They didn't allow you to drink, although they wouldn't have known. But like you can go out and get dinner or whatever. But most of the time, you were so mentally exhausted by the end of the day. Were
you the lowest ranking guy there?
At that point, E4, there was probably one or two other E4s. There was a SEAL team guy there. 2 cops were there going through the course. Don't remember where they were from. And then
you mean MPs or civilian cops?
No, like civilian cops.
Wow. What an eclectic group you have there going.
Yeah. A couple other guys from the 101st Airborne, not from my unit, but other units. And there were some other people that I don't exactly remember who they all were at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, we'd all go out and just get dinner in North Little Rock, and then head back. 2 phases to sniper school. There was stock phase and then shooting phase. I'm trying to remember which one was first. I think that shooting phase was first, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was shooting phase first. So they introduce you to sniper craft itself. Schoolyard stuff, and then all your range time, getting familiar with the weapon. Initially, you probably fire a couple 100 rounds a day, which starts beating up on you. 308 isn't bad, but after a couple 100 rounds, you start to feel it.
Right.
especially from a bolt gun, which they don't even use bolt guns anymore, which is upsetting. But and then you go out there and actually, the thing about sniper school is it's all mental. And there's some road marches mixed in there. I'm not going to say it's not at all physical, but anyone that's going there is probably going to be okay,
Sure.
physically.
Yeah, they're not going to be the 180 on the PT test guy.
Yeah. I don't remember what you had to get. I think the bar was actually pretty low to go there. I think it's like a 240 or something like that.
Yeah, right,
to even be eligible. But everyone there was doing okay. And then so you go through the schoolyard stuff, sniper craft, shooting.
What part did you enjoy the most out of that course?
All of it. I freaking love sniper school.
Really?
It was absolutely the most wonderful thing I've ever done.
Oh yeah.
But it was mentally exhausting. So.
Oh, it was.
Aside from all, and the fun part is like probably what most people see on TV is the ghillie wash. So you have to bring all your stuff to make your own ghillie suit, and then you go there, and then everyone at night in the barracks is making their own ghillie suits, and they kind of give you instruction initially how to make your ghillie suit.
Okay.
And then they do the ghillie wash. So they bring you out into a parking lot, dirt parking lot. And I think at Benning, they have like a little pit that they put you in, but we weren't there. So they spray you with a hose, and there you are with your ghillie suit, and they make you low crawl, back crawl. And they like kick mud and dirt on you, kicking dirt in your face. And like, just basically you're trying to patina your ghillie suit a little bit, but it's like a rite of passage type thing. Like,
all right.
Literally dunk it in a mud puddle to do the same thing. But they work it out of you. So that was kind of like a fun thing. Like, it was like everyone kind of looked forward to it. We all knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And then you go to qualifications. So when I say it's like a mind thing, so you have 2 tries for everything. So they teach you how to do it, and then you have 2 tries to qualify. Oh. So there was known distance during the day, unknown distance during the day, movers during the day, and then night movers. It goes out to 800 yards for known and unknown distance. So known distance, you know exactly how far you're shooting. You get 2 shots at every target that they tell you to shoot. So it's basically a bunch of targets out there that have a number painted on them. They say fire at 1, fire at 2, fire at 3, 7, 8, whatever it was, it randomized. But you knew the distances. Unknown distance, they put you out there. You had to know exactly how to figure out the ranges. So you didn't know what they were. So they'd move the targets on you.
How much would they? For somebody who's, I think is fascinating, and I don't know a thing about it. So unknown range, how much could it vary, and how much? At what point does that distance, when you really have to calculate in, like the fall of your shot or anything like that?
Yeah. Out to 300 yards, it doesn't matter. You leave your 0 at 100 yards, 0, you're good. But the unknown range, when you start getting out to 800, I should have grabbed my book. I still have all my dope from those days. I forget the actual drop from those rounds. But I mean, your spotter in sniper school, there's something called trace. So if your spotter couldn't see trace, like, you were screwed the whole time. So trace is you were actually able to see the wake of the air particles. I'm probably not describing this in the greatest way, but you can actually watch the round travel through the air. It looks like a wormhole traveling through the air. You can actually look at it. You could look at it on YouTube, look at sniper trace. It's like a whole thing. So you have to set your spotting scope at the correct distance. So basically you look at your target, you back it off about 20 yards, and then you can actually watch the trace. I guess it's probably described as a subsonic wake as the round travels. So the air is breaking the sound barrier, of course. So it looks like a wormhole traveling to the ground.
That's amazing.
A little bit harder to see with 308, but they'd be able to help you out with where you were hitting, because at 800 yards, or actually meters, I shouldn't say yards, I'm sorry, 800 meters, like, you can't really see where your rounds are hitting. If it's dirt behind the target, you may see splash, but typically there's grass and shit, and you can't really tell. So it's your spotter, if he sucks, you're done. And in sniper school, you don't get to choose your spotter. It's not like the buddy you went with. It's like they just choose somebody for you, and like, hey, here's your spotter, and you switch off, as you shoot. And then unknown distance, like, you and your spotter working to develop that distance. But I mean, if you get what's called dope, data upon previous engagements, you kind of know what everything should be. But if you're making your targets wrong, and you're using the reticles in your spotting scope or your actual rifle scope itself, there's
Yeah.
ways that you can use the reticle notches to figure out distance, doing math in your head and all those things.
Wow.
You're going to miss. Then you have a certain amount of time. I think it was typically 10 seconds. So they say target 5. You don't know your known distance, or that's unknown distance, and then you guys have to figure out your shot.
Yeah.
Figure out your wind. And then you can either dial in your dope on your scope, or you can do elevation holds based on the mil dots on your scope itself. All depending. And then you have 2 chances. You miss it the first time, you get one more chance. Otherwise, you miss, you're done. They will literally tap you on the shoulder, be like, "Come with me," and you're gone. That's it.
Really?
You're done.
Your test is over, and you got one more chance to do it, and that's it.
Yep. Yep. And that's why I'm saying it was mentally exhausting.
Yes.
So if you go out there and you have unknown distance, and you're on a windy day, you better hope you're good and your water's good. If you go out on a clear day, clear, no wind, you'll probably be okay. Everyone's good enough there that shouldn't be an issue. But you get a shitty windy day, some fog out there early in the morning, it sucks.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And then some other things in the field craft shooting stuff. Every morning they'd come out and they would do something called a Kim's game. So it was called Keep in Memory game. And they went on to teach us that it was designed by Rudyard Kipling, the guy that wrote the Jungle Book.
Yeah.
Either it was called Keep in Memory by him, or his name was Kim, so he named it after his daughter. It didn't matter. There was a couple stories, but they would put a bunch of objects in front of you, 7 or 8 random bullshit objects.
Yeah.
And then you'd get 10 seconds, as typically they were smoking you, to remember what those objects are. And then at some point later in that day, and this one they were a little bit more lenient on, you had 5 tries for this one, that you would have to name X amount of those objects. I don't remember what it was at this point, but at any given point that day, they may come up to you and be like, name the objects. That was tough. That one was hard. So you had to,
now, what was that? Was that designed to teach you something, or was that just designed to weed you out?
Most people think that a sniper's role is to shoot. It's not. It's reconnaissance. It's all reconnaissance.
One of the other thing I was going to tell you, I ran into a site. I don't know. I'd never heard of the site, but I was just reading, and they said this is a quote from them, that they have to. The misconception is you have to be a good shooter. Shooting is only 20% of the course. The rest of it is. This is what they're saying, but then it talks about patience, discipline, instructs on detecting and stalking, estimating range, concealment, camouflage, observation exercises. Yeah, to a layman like me, I'd be like, "Oh, you're putting 1,000 rounds a day down there, right?"
Yeah, I mean, when they're saying 20%, shooting, I mean, it is the foundation of what you do, but the field craft is like the bread and butter. So I mean, maybe 20%. I don't know. I think they're probably a little bit off on that, but yeah, I mean, it's a very small.
But it's not 95% of it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I think the mission statement of a sniper, let's see if I can recall this from all these years ago, to deliver a long-range precision rifle fire on key targets, select targets, and targets of opportunity, is the moniker that they make you memorize. But the majority of it is just reconnaissance. The moment you pull the trigger, your position is up. You're moving. Yeah. So your job, you are at the commander's discretion to give him information. So I mean, if your mission is a kill mission, or a high value target mission, then cool. That's what you do. You take your shot, you move on. Or if you're doing Overwatch, but the main mission of a sniper itself is to provide reconnaissance and information, because you are very good at disappearing. Yeah. But as soon as you fire a shot, that's over for you. Your position is gone, even if you have a suppressor on your rifle. And they're not magical movie devices that make you silent.
Yeah.
So after anyway, and then there's also, I mean, you just mentioned it. So detecting range or range finding. So again, you have 2 chances. So they send one of the sniper instructors out in a giant field. And then you have to range them. And I don't remember the degree of accuracy. I want to say it was within 10 meters, but I could be wrong about that.
Wow, that's tough.
And you have to do it several times. It's not so you get 2 tries at the event, but there's 5 or 6 different ranges that you have to adjust. And they take their 4-wheeler out there and they step off. And I mean, ranging a human being at different ranges on flat terrain, depending on where the earth is, I shouldn't even say flat terrain, even slight hills where the sun is makes a huge difference. The shadow it's casting, the mirage from the sun coming off the ground, like it all makes a huge difference. So that was one of the harder things. And then the other difficult part of the field craft portion and the shooting portion before you got to the stock phase was they put you in a couple different environments, and you would have your scene in front of you, and then they would hide objects out there, and you had to spot X amount of them to pass. So they'd hide a fucking spoon in a bush, or they'd put a dummy mannequin in the back of a room in a building, and you had to spot a certain amount of these, and that takes skill as well. There's different tricks that you can use, like basically I don't know if you've ever stared at an object at a certain distance and maybe you're really tired and your eyes kind of go limp and everything goes blurry.
Sure.
You can use that technique to pick out, especially movement, because they would also sometimes make movement out there. So they'd set up a dummy with something like that's a good way to pick out a movement, also a good hunting technique. So you kind of force yourself into that state where everything's blurry, but like it allows your body to pick up the movement. And they teach you a lot about, anatomy and, how your vision works and like all the interesting things about the ocular system. But that was another very difficult thing. A bottle cap in a tree or, whatever it was. Wow. It was tough. And that was all time limited. And like, you'd have to do a range card in front of you and then you'd have to like draw what you were looking at in front of you and then, point out where those objects were. And then from there, if you pass that, the attrition rate is very, very high at that point.
Understandably.
And then you go to stock phase. Stock phase was fun.
Really?
So they moved us to a base in Texarkana for stock phase because they didn't like Camp Robinson because it was too vegetated. They said it was going to be too easy. I mean,
it would be too easy for you. Yeah.
Yeah, too easy for us. Right. To pass that phase. They brought us to Texarkana, which was very plains-like. And like I said, it's very similar to the ranges that they had at Fort Benning.
Okay.
And so then they teach you, you'd already kind of had a lesson in like the fieldcraft stalking portion and like learning to set up your ghillie suit, to your environment, how your ocular system works, like how you can use camouflage to your benefit, with building your camouflage on your ghillie and where to set up to fool the eyes. It's not as simple as just making yourself match what's around you. It's much more complex than that. And then basically, again, you have 2 chances to get whacked. Well, for this, they gave us 1 practice and then 2 live chances.
Wow.
So they set themselves up. They drop you off, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile away from where they were going to be, and then they would drive to the other end.
And it was up to you to sneak up on them?
And you had to sneak up on them. So they sat in the back of a truck, and these are very, very experienced snipers. So they sat in the back of a truck with their spotting scope and binoculars, back towards where they knew you were coming from. And then they had runners out there. And the runners all had a big long pole with an orange triangle thing on the top. So you had to sneak up to a reasonable range that you could make a reasonable shot.
Yeah.
And you'd get there, and at any point, if they thought they saw any movement as you were stalking the walkers, and then them on the back of the truck had walkie-talkies, and they'd yell out "freeze," and at that point, you had to freeze in your spot, and then they got to try to talk. The guys in the back of the truck would talk on their walkie-talkies, and they'd try to walk the walkers onto you. So they were limited to the instructions that they could give. They couldn't say, like, see that tree over there, walk over there. They have to say, turn right, 2 steps forward, 2 steps left, half step left, sniper at your feet. And then, the walker would walk, and like if they thought they saw you, they'd try to walk that walker onto you. And if they found you, you were done.
As corny as this sounds, I remember reading the book. I remember watching the movie, Clear and Present Danger, right?
Yeah.
With Harrison Ford as Jack Ryan and all that. And they had that scene in there where he was auditioning the sniper. And I was like, they really did that. I didn't know that until you just told me. That's fantastic.
That's completely accurate, except for the point when he like walks up with like a Burger King wrapper.
I know. That was a little
but
the words they just used are the ones that you just said. And I was like,
Yeah.
Well done, you guys.
They're limited to the, like I said, the instructions that they're allowed to give the walkers. Like they're not allowed to like say, hey, you see that bunch of shit over there? Like walk over there. No, like they have to like, because it would be too easy at that point. Because these guys are very experienced. They know where people are probably going to go, but they're fair. They don't want you to fail, but they also don't want you to pass. So like they actually want.
That's a good way to put it.
They need to ensure that like they actually thought that they saw you. By doing this 2 steps to the left, 3 steps to the right, and once you got to your final shooting position, so you get into your hide, you set up, you pull out your rifle, and you're given a blank, or actually 2 blank rounds. So you set up, and then you take your shot at the people in the back of the truck with a blank round.
Yeah.
And at that point, they hold up either a letter or a number. And then you watch it, and then you have to try to remember what that is. So it's not hard to remember what that is, but the idea is there that like somebody can't hide behind a tree, fire a shot, and then
duck back and
then duck back. Like you have to actually see what you're doing, and then from that point, they try to walk that walker onto you again. So if they saw any blast from your muzzle or dirt kicking up, they try to walk you on again. And then if they can't do it, then those guys turn around and the walker comes up to you and he looks at all of the information that you've dialed in on your scope to make sure that it's accurate. Like you can't just walk up there and not actually dial in on your scope, because like that would be bullshit. Like at that point, you're also incorporating what you've learned before about, shooting fundamentals and, how to operate your scope and distance. And then they say, what did you see? And then A4, whatever it was. And then they'd radio to the guys in the back of the truck. Did you hold up an A4? Yep. And then, then the walker walks away. They turn back around, and then you have to sneak off, and they're still looking for you the whole time. So
you still got to get out of there. You're not done.
Yeah, you're not done. God. So if they spot you when you're on your way out, they'll do the same thing, freeze, and then they'll, try to move the walkers onto you.
Oh no.
Yep.
God, how relieved were you after you passed that?
Yeah, so the practice one, I got very, very close to them. For whatever reason, like I'm not trying to sound like arrogant, but like I was good at that. Like that was like that was like the funnest part of like a whole thing. I got way too close, and they didn't see me sneak up. When I took my shot, they were like, Jesus Christ, and I was probably 50 yards from them at that point.
So you were the guy from the movie.
Yeah, they were pissed at me. They were really pissed at me. And like, I would have, had it been a real test, I would have failed because the guy was so close. They saw because of how it was set up, like I would have failed. And they like pitched me out, and like they pulled me off to the side and smoked me a little bit. And I like learned my lesson, but like I thought it was fun. But I did pass my first one. But you're looking at about 50% attrition from that as well. So
first time go. That's fantastic. That is wonderful.
That part like just clicked for me. I don't know if it was from the hunting, whatever it was. But like crawling through fire ants in Arkansas, like, or Texarkana at that point. I think it was actually technically in Texas, but it was miserable. Otherwise, it was like a pretty fun thing.
Yeah.
At that point, I think I started with 25 people, and 7 of us ended up at the end. So after graduated, got back to my unit. The 2 other guys from my unit did not pass, unfortunately. And there was some other stuff in there. There was learning to shoot the M107 50 cal Barrett sniper rifle, which is a piece of garbage. I don't know why it's held up to the pedestal that it is, but it's that's so celebrated now, right? Yeah, it's a 3 MOA weapon at best. It's an anti-material weapon. Like it's not great. There's way better rifles out there. But that's a different story. But there's a lot of cool things that we did in sniper school.
Yeah.
So got back to my unit, and then immediately after that, they were kind of resetting. I was promoted to a E5 sergeant, took a team. And then I got sent to Redstone Arsenal in Alabama to learn to fly the Raven UAV, which is a small handheld UAV. Which that was pretty boring. That was just like I just was drunk the whole time. It was like 2 weeks, and I think I just drank way too much. And that was all civilian taught. It was just
so contractors out there.
Yeah, contractors. Yeah. then came back, and then not long after we got our orders to go to Afghanistan. And then,
well, how does your role now? Not only that now you're an NCO, I understand that, but now you're a sniper. So how do you fit now?
So I had a really interesting role after that. So I didn't necessarily take like a dedicated sniper role.
Okay.
So I was the guy that they handed the M24 to, and or like if they needed me later, to like provide overwatch, I would do reconnaissance quite a bit with small teams later, especially in Afghanistan. I was a very utilitarian role later. It was like I was in a pretty unique situation at that point.
Yeah.
So I could fly this stupid UAV that we never actually like launched because Afghanistan, we were too high in elevation, so we couldn't fly. Like I broke.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, because they come with like these nose cones that they have different camera setups on them. Like my commander was always like, let's get that thing up, and like you just couldn't get it up in those elevations. It just wouldn't fly. And like I don't know how many of those friggin' things I broke. Yeah, like I probably cost the Army hundreds of thousands of dollars just like nose diving these friggin' ravens into the ground. Yeah, so I mean at that point,
I know, and the ravens are they're just what, 18 inches, 12 inches. They're small.
A little bit bigger. I think the wingspan on them is 5.5 feet or something like that.
Oh, but it is.
They click together. They come in two suitcases.
Oh, okay.
They click together. But it is like a one-man portable thing.
Yeah,
the software is pretty amazing on them. Like they'll just fly in circles over you. Like they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
But just not. I mean, they're like they sound like one of the UAVs that you hear now. Like They're buzzing. They're loud. They're just like, I don't know. Wasn't for us. Like I'm not smart enough for that. Then, like I said, I was drunk the whole time. I didn't care. When I said I was crashing them because of elevation, that was just my excuse. I just didn't pay attention. Like they may have been able to fly in Afghanistan. I don't know. So we got our orders to Afghanistan. I was a team leader. They may have moved me to squad leader right before we went. I don't really remember the time frame. I was still an E5 at that point.
What year was this? What year was this?
2007.
2007.
Late 2007.
Yeah.
Maybe beginning of 2008. I remember it was cold. It was very, very cold when we left. Yeah. So it was somewhere in that time. It may have been the beginning of 2008, but I'm pretty sure it was late 07 whole thing. But the fight in Afghanistan was some of the funner stuff I did. So I would get to go out on a lot of reconnaissance missions, very deep in Taliban territory. And it was very traditional kinetic fighting.
Yeah.
That we would, get on birds, fly in the middle of the night, drop in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and hike into villages, and like do reconnaissance and report back to our higher ups, and then other units more higher end units than me would, go in. We did a couple missions. I remember particularly one. We were there with a bunch of cops from Detroit, which was pretty interesting. Some CIA guys that were going around with biometric equipment. That they were basically going in and like scanning everyone's fingerprints in the town and like scanning their retinas with this weird biometric piece of equipment. I don't remember what it was. And I remember it was really interesting because they're having a hard time getting everyone's fingerprints because these people, I don't know how this will come across, but like, I don't know why these people stacked rocks everywhere. Like, I swear to God, that's what they did. They just stacked rocks and like, some sort of farming thing. I don't know. They'd also, build ditches or wadis, but like, I don't know. They just like stacked rocks.
Yeah.
But these people that you would think were 80 were probably, 30 years old, but they wouldn't have fingerprints. Like their fingerprints wore off their fingers. And I'm assuming from stacking rocks. I don't know. It was a very, very interesting thing. But, so we do the retinal scans, but the idea would be that if we ever find a roadside bomb or something like that, you could pull prints off it and then they would be able to run it through this database. They'd be like, okay, this is so-and-so from this village. We scanned him at this point and fly in and there you go. You got your guy. I don't know how successful that ever was, but they brought in like, some CIA guys and like some cops that apparently had some experience with this from Detroit. To run these missions. We would just bring them to the areas and like, again, run reconnaissance for them and, escort them around.
God.
But Afghanistan was pretty cool in regards to like, it was kind of what I thought, fighting was going to be like. And we got into some pretty interesting fights there. Not like Ramadi. Ramadi was just bad.
Was it a difference in between city fighting and country fighting, for lack of a better
Yeah, it was
word.
like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, instead of kicking in door to door and, getting blown up all the time, and there was still IEDs there, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot like we were in an 8-hour firefight. We had doing a patrol. It wasn't far from Charterwall, the place we were stationed at, and we were just doing a dismounted patrol. And it was interesting at that point. I'd just been on my 4-year mark. I was promoted to staff sergeant at that point. I took
at 4 years you were an E6.
At 4 years, I got promoted.
Well done, sir.
On my 4-year mark. E6, whether that's from attrition for the units, whatever it may be. Like was what it was. And then so I took the weapons squad at that point. Again, like I was sniper qualified, so like
that would make sense.
Squad,
yeah.
The weapons squad who ran the 240 and the javelins and all that stuff would basically get farmed out to the other squads as they went out on missions, and then I would just get tasked out to do whatever was needed, or if they needed me to be the platoon sergeant, so whenever I would step up, because I was at that point technically the senior, even though like I was far from the senior.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting, being, I don't know, 25 years old, and having a group of 30 men, in the middle of nowhere. And Afghanistan was very unique, where we were very isolated. So, being 25, 26, whatever age I was, leading a platoon in the middle of nowhere by myself, it was, looking back on it, it's like, what was I thinking? It was like, it was pretty interesting.
Well, you rise in the moment, because I thought about things like that too, and you're that young and you have people that you're responsible for.
Yeah.
And but at the time, you do what needs to be done. You're trying to be the best leader you can. But then when you have time later in life and you look back and you're like, Jesus, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. Looking back, I was like, I was an idiot. Like, how do these people follow me? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So,
I wouldn't have followed me. What did these guys?
Yeah, exactly. We were on a patrol, and my weapons squad got tasked with staying with the vehicles at that point, and like trying to find another route to our end goal, which was like a tiny. No, these villages were very, very small, just like maybe like a quarter mile by a quarter mile mud huts in the middle of nowhere. And so they were trying to find another route, and our platoon leader, our lieutenant, which he was a pretty good guy, but they're all pretty worthless. I mean, you get guys straight out of college who maybe went to Ranger school who thought that like they knew what war was, but at that point they didn't.
No.
But so we were dismounted, and like at that point, like, it didn't make sense to stay with them. So I said I would, run on the dismounted patrol with them. So I took point, because like, why not? Ended up getting lit up, and like we were walking through, and like all the farm fields there, it's just like this gray dirt, just like gray sand, mud, and like they dig these little trenches to like separate all their fields, and that's where they run their irrigation through, and like they're probably like these little mounds to separate the fields, and like where they'd run their irrigation, so they're maybe 6 inches tall. And we got ambushed like very, very badly. And again, I could tell right away it was PKM fire, and I was running lead, so they were shooting at me initially. And I remember hitting the ground and like trying to make myself as small as possible, because rounds were kicking up everywhere. And it was a small force of us. I mean, it was probably 2 squads, and then 2 squads of Afghan army, which is like one of us. And I just remember getting really small in rounds kicking all up around me. And I just remember looking up, and I saw the flashes of them shooting at us, and I look around me, and like the cover I have is literally a 4-inch mound of dirt. Like I was like, I'm an idiot. Like, what am I doing right now? Like, like my whole body was exposed above it, and there I am, like trying to make myself as small as possible. So we get up, and then I'll never forget another squad leader that we had. It was a goddamn hero. Marco Herrera, I think he's still in. I think he's a sergeant major somewhere now at some point. He literally ran over to the Afghan army guys, grabbed one of them by the collar, their platoon leader or whatever he was, and like just reefed him off the ground. He was a big Hispanic guy. I mean, he must have weighed 250 pounds, and like reached this Afghani, and they're pretty small people. And I remember him like picking him up, and like I'm just still like getting on the ground and getting shot at. Like there's nowhere for me to go. Like I didn't even.
This was during the fight.
during the middle of the fight.
Oh my God.
He stood up in the middle of us, like just getting lit up, grabbed their commander and like picked him up, and then like the Afghanis like ended up following him, and he ended up flanking the enemy. They were able to get away at that point, but he stood up in the middle of a goddamn firefight and just like grabbed, like, because there was nowhere for us to go. I mean, we're in the middle of a field, and they were in like one of these small like villages with a dirt wall, which they have these mud walls, which are surprisingly very robust.
Oh, they are.
It's crazy. I don't know how they do it. It's like shit, mud, and grass that they pack together, and it's like stronger than cement.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird. And he grabbed these people under like a crazy barrage of fire, grabbed these Afghan forces and, basically did a, battle drill 1 alpha, like flanking, at the enemy. And they ran off and they got on their motorcycles and ended up going to the next village. But I will never forget that. You got a Bronze Star with Valor for that. And then we ended up just continually pursuing, these people in every village we went to, because I mean, these villages you can basically see them, off in the distance. And they would take their stupid friggin' motorcycles and like run off, and like we'd shoot at them, and like they were too fast and we couldn't get to them. They go to the next village and we'd like walk across these open fields because that's the only way to get to it. And like it was just a repeat procedure of like just walking from village to village, getting shot at. And that was the kind of fight. It was like a very traditional, like, flanking, like lay down, cover fire, and like have the have a squad flank, which we got really good at it, after a while. But that first moment we got ambushed when Herrera grabbed those guys, ripped the Afghan commander up and like made him flank, I'll never forget that. Like, I mean, it probably saved my life, thinking about it. Although they can't shoot for shit over there, so maybe I would have been okay. I don't know. That was the kind of fight that it was there. There was a couple other areas. It was pretty bad. I forget the valley that we were tasked to go into, and like there was a lot of convoys getting attacked there, so they dropped us in earlier in the day, and this is more of like a sniper role, and I set up a sniper overwatch position, and then throughout the day watching for people setting in IEDs. And then as night fell, we grabbed it was probably a squad and a half, and we basically had the road, and then there was villages all along the road, and basically what was happening is they were running, all the convoys were trying to run through at night, and they were getting ambushed every night. These weren't infantry, they were just like people running supply routes. They were getting ambushed all the time, and like they just could never get a hold of them, the guys that were shooting at them. So we just basically hid in all these villages and waited for the convoys. We had dummy convoys going by that would just drive up and down the road, and we would just patrol like in complete blackness, in complete dark out, with our night vision, just like trying to find these people that were ambushing. And we got a couple. It was a cool mission. These were like things that like you picture that what you're going to do. So
you're throwing bait out there, waiting for them to do something so you can react.
And there was a lot of overwatch, in my sniper role where I would, do reconnaissance or, go out and like wait for people to set in IEDs with just 1 or 2 people, like up on a rooftop and just like sneak off. And like, it was a much more interesting, time. Whereas like Ramadi was like trying to stay alive. Afghanistan was like, I felt like a soldier again.
I mean, how could you not live the phrase baptism by fire any better than what your experience in Ramadi was?
Ramadi was bad. And then at that point, I'd hit my 4.5-year mark or whatever it was in Afghanistan. And I was going to be stop lost anyway. So I voluntarily extended to finish out another 15-month tour.
Chad, thank you for everything. It's been a pleasure. It's been a privilege to talk to you. It really has.
I hope I make it out that way, and maybe we can share a drink someday.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Once again, that was former Army Staff Sergeant and Bronze Star recipient, Chad Rancourt. Let me say thanks to Chad. It was certainly a privilege for me to present your story. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and until next time, on your feet and fall out.